Hey, yo.
In the year 1997, we got WCW vs. NWO World Tour. But in Japan, they would receive Virtual Pro Wrestling 64. These were the first two games to feature the beloved Aki game engine that would span many titles. Same game though, right? Well, not exactly. Released 2 months after World Tour, Virtual Pro Wrestling 64 would come as the N64 sequel to the 1996 PlayStation title, Virtual Pro Wrestling, which you might know as WCW vs. the World. While THQ would publish the US releases thanks to their video game deal with WCW, Asmic Ace Entertainment would handle the task for the Japanese market. Okay, so they have different names and different publishers. But what else is different? Well, let's find out. While the intro for WCW vs. NWO World Tour is rather short and focuses primarily on the rivalry between the two organizations, the one we would see here is a bit longer and features a wide variety of wrestlers and promotions, similar to the one we would see in WCW NWO Revenge the following year. And if you have a listen, you'll notice that the music itself is different as well. The roster selection here is very impressive for the time, with over 100 different wrestlers to choose from, and even though only a portion of that is comprised of WCW and NWO members, the rest of the inclusions make this sort of a dream roster for some. While the real promotions and wrestler names could not be used, we do see the likenesses of many guys from Japanese promotions such as All Japan Pro Wrestling and New Japan Pro Wrestling. We also see legends like Andre the Giant, Terry Funk, Giant Baba, and many more. Even past WWF superstars like Vader and Bam Bam Bigelow are here, as well as Ken Shamrock, who was actually signed to the WWF when this game was released. With all that being said, if you're familiar with the roster from World Tour, you can clearly see that there are many more inclusions here. However, Glacier and Wrath, both included in the US version, are absent from this game for some reason, as is NWO Sting. Can't say anybody will miss him. Also missing here are the hand-drawn portraits seen in World Tour. Some of the attires differ here as well, such as classic Hulk Hogan sporting black knee pads instead of red, and Chris Benoit appearing in his ring gear used while wrestling in Japan, rather than his Four Horsemen attire he used in WCW. Entrances are not featured here, nor were they in World Tour, but we do see pre-match in-ring introductions with wrestler taunts. Arenas here are not pay-per-view or show-specific, as would become commonplace in later games, but instead we see one selection for each promotion. As an early 3D wrestling title, there isn't much to see here. Rings are situated into an enclosed area with ringside barriers and a low-res audience. But it's nice to see each selection feature unique logos and color schemes, with some even featuring unique turnbuckle pads. There's even an arena that enables a black and white mode, maybe to simulate matches with some of the older legends included here. Most fans are familiar with this game engine and control layout, but let's dive into it for those who may be new to the series. The grapple system was designed to be easily picked up and played by everybody, including newcomers. A is your grapple button. Tapping it will engage into a weak tie-up, while holding it will land a strong one, and once here, you can perform moves by pressing either A or B. Adding a directional button to either of these commands will open up a larger variety of moves. Strikes are performed by pressing or holding B, also utilizing the weak and strong system. The shoulder buttons are used to dodge, block, and counter enemy attacks, with the right button used for strikes and the left for grapples. Timing these just right can result in reversals, as well as avoiding grapples altogether. Running is performed by pressing down C, with up C reserved for getting in and out of the ring. With the directional pad used for moving your wrestler around the ring, the analog stick is assigned a taunt command. Taunting will raise a wrestler's spirit meter, as will successfully performing moves and avoiding enemy attacks. Once this meter fills, wrestlers will engage their special state, a short-lived period in which he can perform a signature or finisher move by initiating a strong grapple and then moving the analog stick. These moves are pretty accurate for the most part, though some of the animations aren't as true to their real-life counterparts as they would become in later games. Diving deeper into these finishers, and we see that some things differ from World Tour, such as Scott Hall's Outsider's Edge, which isn't perfect here but appears more accurate than the sit-out variation featured in the US release. In addition, DDP's Diamond Cutter is featured here as a standard strong grapple with a spinning sit-out powerbomb appearing as his special move. I'm not sure why things like this were changed, seeing as the two games were so close in release dates, but I do find it extremely interesting, to say the least. Overall, I have to applaud the developers for taking a very unconventional controller and creating a play mechanic that is extremely easy and fun to navigate. Not to mention the innovative additions to the gameplay like performing grapples on the aprons, as well as diving attacks. Winning matches on higher levels of difficulty requires some strategic match technique. Simply spamming strong attacks and grapples early on usually results in the enemy AI reversing most of your attempts, thus gaining spirit while yours lowers. A lower spirit meter leads to the wrestler being more vulnerable to submissions and pinfalls, so it's important to ease your way into a match, utilizing stronger and bigger moves as time progresses. Another feature not seen in World Tour is the post-match scoring system, featuring many different statistics on each wrestler. It's just too bad I can't tell what any of it says. This is something that would be included in WCW NWO Revenge the following year. Visually, the game isn't a fantastic looking title, with the graphics even being criticized upon release. We see low-res textures, frequent clipping, and not just with wrestlers and other objects, but also with wrestlers amongst themselves, with arms and legs sometimes popping in and out of torsos, but honestly this just never really bothered me. Faces are also sometimes hit or miss, with some of them portraying real-life wrestlers decently and others just looking way off. Games not far around the corner such as WWF Warzone would feature much more realistic graphics, but there's still this sort of charm associated with the visuals here that I've always appreciated. And since they didn't look great to begin with, they didn't age as poorly as some games have, if that makes any sense at all. We would see the inclusion of a referee here, which was heard but not seen in the US release. However, it would be included as a feature in Revenge. I like this addition to the game, and I do wish it would have made it into World Tour. Weapons are here and can be pulled out of the crowd. We see items like baseball bats, broken tables, and chairs, and they all feel very satisfying to use. However, they cannot be taken into the ring. These weapons, along with other strikes and moves, can lead to wrestlers being busted open, with faces then being covered in blood for the remainder of the match. Music for both games was provided by Hideaki Mitsui, who was also responsible for composition on Tekken 2. These are not only some of the best tracks I've ever heard in a wrestling title, but also gaming in general. They have a distinct Japanese vibe to them and help to breathe life into each match. Most fans that grew up with this one can't help but to feel nostalgic when hearing one of the many great tracks included here. Other sounds such as attack impacts, slams on the mat, and voices are pretty solid for an N64 title, despite some of them being a bit on the goofy side, like Nash yelling out "Moo" as he hits his signature powerbomb. A Along with standard 1 vs 1, 2 vs 2, and 2 vs 1 handicap matches, other game modes included here are Tournament, League, Battle Royal, Elimination, and Champion Road, which is the game's career mode of sorts. And though it may not feature any cutscenes or storylines, there is still a lot of fun to be had as you progress through the different promotions' matches. One of the biggest additions we see here that wasn't in the US version is the Wrestler Edit mode. If you're familiar with WCW NWO Revenge, you'll know that this mode would end up being featured there, but many aren't aware that this is where it got its start. Each wrestler features 4 attire slots, with every single one fully customizable, right down to clothing selections and color options. And some even feature multiple head selections, with options including various sunglasses, hats, hair, and facial hair. So the previously mentioned Hulk Hogan attire with the black knee pads can be corrected, or you can create a Diesel-like attire for Nash, and really so much more. This is also where you can enter English and corrected names for the non-licensed members of the roster, as I was able to do with the help of videos I found on YouTube by a content provider going by the name Wrestling Video Games. So shout out to that channel for taking the time to provide those helpful videos. For years I had skipped importing this one because I was under the impression it was merely a clone of World Tour, and while it is similar in many aspects, I feel there are enough differences here to pick this one up if you're a big fan of the US release. With the larger roster and the Wrestler Edit, as well as other small additions like the referee model and more arenas, it's clear that this is the definitive version. Most of the game's text is in Japanese, but it's still rather easy to navigate as this one isn't very text heavy. This one was affordable a few years back, but the price is, of course, rising as this era of wrestling titles and retro gaming in general are continuing to gain popularity. So if you're going to pick it up, I would do so sooner than later. As most of you may know, the game's sequel, Virtual Pro Wrestling 2, is a game completely unique to the Japanese market and is regarded by some as the greatest wrestling title on the N64. And don't worry, we will cover that one in due time. But until the next video, I just want to thank you all for watching. Please stay safe, have fun, enjoy life. I'll see you all next time.